Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to listen to the Bonfire. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with the goal, and that goal is to just walk the stage. This Saturday, when the Fire, at the exact same time the Fire are playing, is when I'm going to be walking the stage and getting my degree, so I'll finally be done. As always, I am joined by my lovely, lovely co-hosts, DJ.
I don't know. I have nothing smart-ass to say tonight.
And Tim.
I don't believe that for a second. I think it's just going to come out later, DJ. Although, honestly, I wanted any excuse to get out of going to my college graduation. And a Fire game would have been enough of an excuse for me at that point. So
I would say this. If it was like, if it was just like out of state, like if like I wasn't from here, then yeah. Like I do have a friend who is from that one place that has a yellow effing team. And he's not walking. He's just going straight home because his family isn't able to make it. So yeah, I feel that. But yeah, I get that.
It's a very long trip from Dortmund.
Yeah, that's funny, Tim. You're very funny. Anyways, we're just gonna get straight on into the news. Our news portion is gonna be a bit more longer than usual because we're not gonna be reviewing any games because nothing happened. So. Here we go. I bet you guys missed our voices. So we're going to start off with the United States Olympic team. They recently played against Japan, lost 2-0 in their little friendly prior to going to Paris. The goalkeeper, Patrick Schultz, did not have a great game, and it possibly opens the door for either former Fire player, I apologize, Gaga Slanina and Chris Brady. I have a lot of names in front of me. I apologize. And Brady, he recently was interviewed with Joe Chats on Tap Sportsnet. Go check that out. He said he wants to be released to go to Paris to play in the Olympics.
And he just wants the ability to go, right? Which you can't blame the guy for. He's
True.
been in touch with the team. I don't obviously know the exact content of those discussions. But my gut feeling is that one bad game is not enough to make the Marko Mitrovic, who's a former Fire youth coach, by the way, reassess his like goalkeeper order, or at least like maybe not reassess the goalkeepers that are officially named to the roster, because as it stands, you take 3 goalkeepers, 2 are officially on the roster. They get to play on match days. One is an alternate or reserve that you get to keep in your back pocket in case something happens to somebody. The Olympics have very draconian and like archaic roster rules, which is a pain for the men. It's more of a pain for the women. But what that ultimately means is like there's a chance that Brady could go to Paris and have no ability to play, or even be on the bench for matches, which is just frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, just going, and even if you're just there as an alternate or just, just to give, I guess, moral support, it's still something, I guess, than just, I guess, I don't want to say sitting at home, because he's not going to be sitting at home if he doesn't go. He's, of course, going to be playing for the Fire, but still, it's something that a lot of players look forward to, especially if they get a call up for their country, be it the Olympics or the senior team whatsoever. So fingers crossed, personally, that Brady and Guti get called up to go to the Olympics and try to win gold, honestly.
Guti's more of a long shot, but at the same time, he's dropped hints that he has, like, Eltree have been in touch with him, and he is, Mexico eligible, so that's a possibility.
True.
Obviously, the Mexican national team setup's depth chart is not nearly what the US's is at the moment. And I one thing, like, the US got a lot of dual nationals when it's like more likely that they play for the US than the other country. Like, that's how we got Florian Balogun to play for the United States men's national team, because like he wasn't going to play for England realistically. But the downside of that is that there's dual nats that are US eligible that choose to play for other countries because they realize their chance of of playing for the U.S. at this point, just given the roster, the ages of a lot of the players, and how stacked the U.S. is at a number of positions. It's just a rougher proposition for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly the reason I wasn't completely shocked when Gaga announced that he was going to go with the United States as opposed to Poland, because Poland, especially in the goalkeeper section, does have a lot of good goalkeepers. So I don't blame Gaga for going to the U.S. And honestly, he is from here, so it also does make sense. So, but yeah, no, I did see a lot of El Tri fans and media talking about Brian Gutierrez possibly going green instead of red, white, blue.
Yeah. However, somebody else that is playing for the red, white, and blue.
Yes. Sergio Auriel. Yes. He recently featured for the U.S. youth national team, who played 2 games. Well, he featured for the second game that happened most recently in a 1-0 win against Uruguay. The U.S. youth national team also beat Argentina 1-0, but Auriel did not feature for that game. But he is there. So we do have a fire player of some sort for the red, white, and blue.
And the cool thing about those matches is that the camp was being held in South America. So the team got exposure to that environment, to just like the cities, to the logistics of playing in that environment, which is, I think, really useful. It's something that, like, when you talk to youth national or like former youth national team players, like, they'll say that like that stuff really does help you prepare for tournaments if you ever go down there, or possibly like some of these guys could have playing time in like Argentina or somewhere at some point. So it's cool that they got that exposure, and it's cool that the U.S. came, out with 2 wins against, 2 fairly good programs. I mean, I don't want to read too much into that, because we're talking about matches where like half the team substitutes off at the half. Like the U.S. substituted goalkeepers at the half at both matches. So like, we're not exactly talking about teams that are necessarily going all out to win it, so much as they are for like trying to get experience and figure things out and stuff like that in these friendlies.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's not just for sports, but like just anytime you're able to leave the country, go somewhere else to like truly expand on your craft, is, those memories stay for a lifetime. So for those players, they're definitely going to remember that, even if they don't go on doing that or at a more higher level. But, all the power to them, all the glory to them. And of course, the red, white, and blue at the senior level had a few friendlies preparing for Copa America right around the corner. The first one wasn't so fun with a 5-1 loss to Colombia, but they did have what we're essentially calling a 1-1 win against Brazil.
I will say, during that Colombia game, I turned it off for like 40 minutes, turned it back on. I was like, it's 3-1 now? Okay, I'm not watching this anymore.
Yeah, that was a game the U.S. didn't feel like it was up for. But having said that, the match after that, they did make up for it. I was on record as saying that I thought that Ethan Horvath should start the second game, because Matt Turner isn't playing for his club and he looked shaky for the U.S. in that match. But my goodness, did he turn it on and stood on his head.
Matt Turner showed up against Brazil. It's like a bunch of players.
I feel like Matt Turner will turn up if it's against a really good opponent, but as a bad one, he doesn't. I've noticed that sometimes.
Well, and it was a squad thing, right? Like it was the whole squad. It wasn't just Matt Turner that had that kind of a performance against Colombia. So, you just have to sort of like, it's unfortunate. I mean, it felt like the team really was treating the first match as a friendly and the second match more like an actual match. But whatever. It's the biggest 1-1 win for the United States probably since the 2022 1-1 win since 2010 against England, and biggest win-draw combination such as it is for the United States since the 0-0 draw against England in the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah, honestly, but it's still, a lot of people are questioning the integrity of Greg Berhalter, and some people did say that it's possible that if the U.S. doesn't have a good Copa America, their Berhalter might be out the door, and they'll be looking for another HC before 2 years from now when we have a World Cup on home soil.
Yeah, my U.S. soccer sources think that it's unlikely that. I mean, basically, regardless of what Berhalter does, and there's no sporting results that will at Copa America that would get his contract examined and where the federation would consider letting him go. Oh. Now, I mean, Alex has his own sources at U.S. Soccer. Neither one of us know who the others are, obviously, but his seem to think that it's a possibility. I don't know. Like, obviously, it's one of those things where nothing is possible until it is possible. But I really doubt that unless the U.S. does something absolutely atrocious, that Greg Berhalter's tenure is rethought.
Like possibly like just crashing out completely in the group stage or whatever.
Qatar 2022.
Yeah, I think that even crashing, I think that may not be enough. You know what I mean? So who knows?
I imagine it would have to be something like the U.S. loses like massive amounts that just are beyond embarrassing. That I imagine would have to be the ultimate case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we do have a few more pieces of news before we get into our men in red, and that is our girls in blue, the Red Stars. They recently had a game over at the friendly confines of Wrigley Field, and they set a NWSL record of around 35,000 people at the game. Unfortunately, the result wasn't their way. It was a 2-1 defeat to the Bay, which I remember I was at a pizza place with my girlfriend. We were celebrating our anniversary, and they did have the game on, and I saw the first bagel, and I was like, oh wow, this is, well, at least people are there. And it was also raining, which is unfortunate. Like the first Saturday of June, it rained for the Fire, and then the second Saturday of June, it rained for the Red Stars. So hopefully it doesn't rain this Saturday for my graduation. That'd suck. But still, a lot of people showed up, and it just showed that people will come to women's sports, of course, with a proper place to go to, including a way to get there, because the Red Stars have been on the lower side of attendance at Bridgeview. Speaking of Bridgeview, on a bit of the negative, literally almost right after this game where they set that record attendance, Riot Fest, a festival that normally happens in Chicago in Douglas Park, if I remember correctly, announced that they're moving from Chicago to Bridgeview to SeatGeek. And it's at the same weekend as when the Red Stars are supposed to take on San Diego, September 21st. That was essentially what me and other soccer fans in Chicago were asking, like, wait, something's not right, because the Red Stars are playing that weekend. And then the president of the Red Stars, Karen Litzau, said, "It's unfair and unfortunate to have our club put in this situation, shining a light on the vast discrepancies in the treatment of women's professional sports versus men's professional sports. We are committed to ensuring our players and fans have a first-rate experience on and off the pitch, and we are working diligently to find a solution that will ensure our September 21st game is a success." And I remember having a conversation between Joe Chatz and Alex Campbell on Twitter about what are the possibilities. They said Soldier Field isn't really an option. I'm guessing because of the time, since it's only a few months beforehand, they're not really able to squeeze in. There was also mention of possibly going to like a university field. Alex mentioned UIC being a possibility, but like worst case would be that they would have to move to like Minnesota or like St. Louis or somewhere that's not Chicago because of this.
So yeah, and according to reporting that is out there, the Red Stars were informed in May that they may have to move the match. They weren't told full details as to why. They said at that point, again, this is reporting. There's some really good reporting in the Sun Times from Annie Costa Beal. I don't think I've ever said her name out loud, so I hope that's how it's pronounced. But she reported on the timeline, and this lines up with what sources we've been able to talk to. The team was informed in May that they may have to move the match, and they said, okay, we can look into it. Are you going to pay for the next venue? Because we have a contract with you that says that we can play there that day. And they basically didn't hear back. The issue was sort of dropped. They were informed officially on June 4th that there was going to be this, the Riot Fest was going to be happening that weekend. At SeatGeek, they were not told further details than that. And they said, okay, well, how is this going to work? Like, where exactly is it going to be? How are we going to be able, like, how loud is it going to be? Where are stages and sound and all that stuff? And like, where are fans coming and going from? And like, are we going to be able to get in and out? Like all those things. They didn't get an answer. They did wait a little bit to respond. I think they had to sort of like stop and gather their thoughts. They haven't heard, Riot Fest put out a statement that said that they thought that this had been taken care of, and basically like, it's not on us, more or less was the vibe. Like, oh no, we hope it gets worked out. This isn't on us. I'm not sure how much I'd really believe that, because you would think they would have to have been aware of this other event. And I would just assume like the natural thing that you'd want to do is start a conversation with the other party and be like, hey, how many people normally park for you guys? Because like we could use parking, and like it just seems like it's natural that those discussions would have gone on. But this is where we are, and I mean it's very odd timing that it's coming on the heels of obviously like the Red Stars' best attended game in history, because it's NWSL's best attended game in history at Wrigley Field. And yeah, the Red Stars have been on a campaign this year, basically pointing out that they are not getting treated the way that some of the men's teams in this city are. And the other thing that Karen Litzau hasn't been quiet about is the fact that they don't think that SeatGeek is really a good home for them going forward.
Yeah, I mean, ever since the Bears and the White Sox have expressed wanting a new stadium, the Red Stars have also been adamant in saying we want a piece of the pie, we want a seat at the table, because Bridgeview, and I know there's some Fire faithful that do have Bridgeview and Toyota Park SeatGeek, that it holds a special place in their hearts, whether it's because of history or because of the fact that they've just been going there for a while. But it's just, in my opinion, a difficult location. And with the recent Red Stars attendance number and like all of a sudden breaking that record the moment they were in a place that has a good location, right off the Addison Red Line. And it kind of just shows, because yeah, people will drive because either they have to go from super far away or they just prefer it, but a lot of people also want to just go there easily. And I talked with our own Scotsman, Paul McCann, about it, and we mentioned how for recent Red Stars games especially, and as well as when the Fire plays at SeatGeek, just how hard it is to get there, even by driving. And what's funny is that if you go on the Riot Fest website, it tells you like all how to get there, and it says public transit. Take the CTA Orange Line to the Midway station. We advise you to take Pace Bus Route 386. And here's the kicker. If you leave the fest after 7 p.m., you will have to take a ride share back to the CTA Orange Line. So
and they make it sound like that's close by when that's 5 miles away, which is like, in terms of urban distances, like that's greater. We're talking about the distance from like the Loop to Wrigley Field, right? Like literally it's that distance. So yeah. So either way, this is not an ideal situation for the Red Stars. This is not the end of the story, obviously. Of course not. And we'll talk about it hopefully as things get resolved. But this just looks again like push come to shove. Bridgeview has been a home for soccer. I don't think it's fair to say that it's been a good home for soccer. Yeah. And they certainly haven't treated the soccer teams like a priority
True.
Now, what the village of Bridgeview, like what Bridgeview's mayor has said, is that this was just about making the most money for the taxpayers as possible. And they did have their taxes more or less double because Bridgeview, like the like quote unquote like non-sporting events at Bridgeview early on fell well short of expectations, which part of it is like any economist that has studied like the economics of sports venues will tell you there's always rosy projections about how many like concerts and stuff are going to be at a venue, and it always falls short of that. But they didn't have anyone telling them that, so they really were in a rough spot for a long time, just economically. Less so now, partly because of the money that Joe Mansueto's promised, despite the team not playing there. But you know, the economic argument isn't entirely. Like it's a real argument for them again, because it's like a 16,000 person village that has a 20,000 person stadium in it, right? So like it's a lot of money for the village, one way or the other.
True. It just seems unfair that literally right after this game where they broke record attendances, they're just being told, all right, for this one game, that's definitely going to be like a big game if you follow the NWSL. Like they're all of a sudden just kicked out of their home, and now they have to figure out what to do.
It's a nationally televised game. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, like we mentioned, more updates to follow once they happen, because September is still a bit of way. So, moving from the girls in blue to the men in red, it's summertime, so of course we're going to be talking about transfers, and really the two things we have are. Well, first of all, there is a possibility that Federico Navarro could move to Boca for about 10 mil for 10 M's. That's a decent amount of money.
It's a report out of a reporter from South America who's a reputable reporter. Something that we've seen before is that sometimes, I don't want to say lost in translation because that makes it sound like it's a language thing, when realistically it's just that not all details are the same, and you hear different things, whether you're talking to agents or, sporting people. But I believe the team has been willing to shop Federico Navarro. I know that they have. I know that a move to Argentina has been discussed, and it's something that everyone sort of agrees is logical. It's where he's from. It's where he's familiar. He still has a good reputation there. The $10 million part is the part that I take with the largest grain of salt, but you don't know what happens, right? Like in the course of a negotiation, somebody can say $10 million would definitely make it happen. And then that somehow gets reported as $10 million because someone talks to someone and they talk to the reporter or something. So, but it does go to show that it looks like Federico Navarro could be someone that potentially is on the move. He hasn't really progressed. I don't think in the past couple of seasons. He started out with a lot of promise. He sort of worked his way out of the starting 11. I thought he had a good couple of matches leading up to this break, so that's a turn in form. But I don't think that overturns what's happened over the past 3 years.
Yeah, and especially since Georgios Giacomakis, he's had a transfer out for about 10 million. So, just goes to show that
now, Giacomakis is a sort of like late prime player, and Federico Navarro is just like entering his prime. So there's a difference there. But you also don't pay like a guy that can score goals. Like that's the thing that you care the most about in soccer, because that's what wins you games more than anything else.
Of course.
And like a good like ball winning six, which Federico Navarro, maybe projects as, but isn't consistently in MLS. Like that's important, but like not as important as like this guy is going to bag you, 15 goals a season. Important.
True. All right. And then the other one, that this is definitely the one that's going to be turning the heads of a lot of people. Xherdan Shaqiri, he recently said he wants to go back to Europe. Bunch of people have reported up on this, including our own Alex Calabrese. Tom Bogert as well has reported on this.
Yeah, it came from a press conference he gave with the Swiss national team ahead of their Euros. He said he wants to go back to Europe. He said with a wink afterwards when asked where he'd want to play, I'm going to say it the way that the Chicago Fire in-stadium announcer says it, Basel, even though I know it's Basel. But
Really?
yeah. So, well, other way around, actually, my bad. But that being what it is, the Fire I have been looking to move on from Shaqiri. I think that was obvious when he hasn't played for the past couple of matches and was allowed to go early to a camp. Like, that never happens with a full first team player, let alone a guy that is wearing the armband.
True. And I mean, here's the thing. I'm someone that was excited about Shaqiri coming to Chicago. I thought that even though he wasn't going to, I guess, put like in terms of exchange of like how much he's worth versus how much money we gave him, it wasn't probably going to be there, but he was still going to do like okay, or maybe even better than that. He pretty much kind of fell. He was below expectation essentially, and apart from like a few moments, especially the game against Miami, the Messi-less Miami last season at Soldier Field, that was probably one of like the biggest like Shaqiri games he had with Chicago. But still, it's not enough to essentially remember him by. And I remember reading, I think someone said on Twitter that he's probably going to be one of the like remembered as one of the worst DPs in Fire, or maybe even in MLS history.
Jay,
I would not go there. To be perfectly honest, Shaqiri, for what we expected, was not good. But he was not good similar to the way Gaston Jimenez was not good. If you had Shaqiri come in as a TAM player, like low TAM, I don't think we have as many issues with him as we have right now.
True.
Same with Gaston.
Yeah. No, if you look at go ahead, sorry, DJ.
Oh, I was about to go into the history, but plus, I mean, we're the Fire. We've had two of the worst DPs in history. He's nowhere near Nery Castillo and Jairo Torres levels.
Yeah. When you look at Xherdan Shaqiri, like if I were to like, unless you're like a stats nerd and can remember how many goals and assists he had in like 2022, if you put his seasons, if I just like took the number of goals and assists that he had in his season and wrote them on one side of a piece of paper and then wrote the year and the team on the other side, his Fire seasons are basically indistinguishable from the rest of his career. Like the guy has only scored double digit goals, I think on 3 occasions in his career. Or like goals and assists. Like, he's not a game in, game out game winner. He's a guy that's good in tournaments. He will have some big moments, and that's always what he's been. And the thing is, he performed basically the same for the Fire as he did everywhere else. And I think that it wasn't crazy to think that he would perform better given that it was a different level, but like the quality of play between Ligue 1, where he was not playing, like he was on the bench, and MLS, like Ligue 1 is better. Like it's a better league, but it's not drastically better top to bottom. Like, I mean, you got like, PSG, but you're also facing a lot of smaller clubs that have significantly lower budgets, and Shaqiri wasn't playing against those teams. So to assume that a guy that like their coach at the time thought wasn't good enough to sometimes even make the game day roster would kill it in MLS, I think was just naive on a lot of our parts.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we were just all naive, like you said, and also just starstruck, like with the few moments. Essentially what he did in Chicago, like you mentioned, it's very similar to what he did at other clubs where he had one moment that really just shone out. I mean, we're to this day still seeing the bicycle kick he scored in, 2016 against Poland?
Yes.
In the Euro 2016. Like, so like we're still seeing that. Like that's in the intro for like the TV broadcast of Euro 26 for this Euros, which always haunts me as a Poland fan. But still.
Yeah, it's a big moment. He scored a hat trick in a World Cup, which is huge, right? Like
exactly.
Some phenomenal players don't get to do that. But I mean, let me put it this way. Across all competitions, he appeared for Bayern Munich in 81 matches and he scored 17 goals. We don't know if this is the last match for the Fire or not. He may return, but he's played in 75 matches across all comps for the Fire and has scored 16 goals. Like, the guy is performing the same as he did everywhere else. Like, it's now obviously like the Fire play a like different level of competition than Bayern does most of the time. You know, obviously there's some DFB Pokal matches where that's not true, but like he's performed the same basically everywhere, you know? And
True.
so to expect more than that from him, I think was just not realistic. And that's what we've seen.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I think a lot of Chicago fans are singing na 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 hey 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 goodbye, or as I said when I posted on my story, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, good night. But
yeah, I think the bigger question isn't so much should he go, because I think that a lot of people are agree that he hasn't been a good use of the DP slot, especially
or
this
rather
season
how
where
much
he's
we're
been-
going to get out of him.
Well, no, because for a DP you don't get any of the transfer fee. I think the question is what should the Fire be doing with the spots, assuming they're vacated? Because it's
of course
it's a DP slot as well as an international roster slot.
true. I mean, you have the DP of Hugo Kuipers, whose job it is to score goals up front. So like, and I'm guessing Gaston Jimenez isn't going to stay on that DP tag for a while.
He can be bought down. So yeah, the team can very likely. Now here's the thing though, the senior roster is full. So to bring in 2 players, the team needs to get 2 players off.
And that's definitely going to happen, especially in the off season, I think.
Yeah, I think the question is more this summer because Heights,
Of course.
more players are available in the summer. It's the bigger window by far, by like an order of magnitude.
Mhm.
And I think the question is like, can the Fire, like under Georg Heights, the team has not really made many moves in the summer. Like
Yeah.
Osman Doumbia and I think Federico Navarro are the biggest summer acquisitions. And like Federico Navarro was a fairly heralded player, like coming in on a mid 7-figure transfer fee from Argentina, which as a U22, which is like a fairly big deal. But like no one was like, oh my God, they brought in this like, you know, kid from Argentina and now the team is radically different, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, not much radically different, especially as The Athletic posted an article recent about which MLS teams are the most entertaining to watch, written by Tom Bogart, who's in last place. It's us. And he said, someone had to be last with another hapless rebuild, underperforming high-paid players, and painfully distorted attack. Well, the Chicago Fire feel right. And he labeled Shaqiri being here as a big, fat failure.
Yeah, it hasn't been a great use of a DP slot. Like, that's clearly fair.
So, yeah. But we do have, I guess, some things to look forward to, whether it's this summer transfer window to see who else is going to come in, when some slots are going to be, I guess, you know, depleted and refilled. We also have Toronto to look forward to. So this Saturday, we will be playing in Toronto. They last year won the Wooden Spoon as the team with, of course, the worst record in MLS. The squad, for the most part, is largely unchanged. They do have a new head coach of John Herdman, former of the Canadian men's national team, as well as Canadian women's national team before that. And he has essentially breathed new life into the squad and has gotten some use out of the fairly expensive DPs from Italia to perform.
One of whom will not be performing on Saturday because Bernadeschi got a red card in their previous match against DC. So he's spending a mandatory vacation in Club Red for this one, which does help because he by far, like not so much this season because I think both Insigne and Bernadeschi have been committed this season, but over the course of their time, he has been the more committed of the two. Although it's sort of like pot and kettle, like which one is blacker a little bit.
Yeah. Don't mess with him because, you know, don't be acting mean because there's probably a 40 in his jeans. If you know, you know. So yeah, the Toronto, even though are winless in their last 3 matches, they recently had a 2-2 draw against DC. With that red card, as we mentioned, they lost at home against Cincinnati all the way back May 25th. And they're 6th, though, in the Eastern Conference. So still all that. They are above us. 7-7-3 is their record with an exact 0 goal differential. So, incredible. So, of course, the Fire, though, at the same time I'm sorry.
Oh, they're winless in their last 3, and the Fire undefeated in the last 3. So
yes, that's what I was going to say. I'm sorry. You lifted your hands, and I thought I was missing something that I was right about to get to. Yes. So Toronto are winless in 3. We are unbeaten in 3 because we have 1 win, 2 draws. That win is at home. The draw and the 2 draws are at home and on the road. Now, of course, this is the start of a long away stint. Next 3 games. So this game and 2 more are on the road. Unfortunately, the Fire haven't won on the road. I feel like this is a cycle where not only we find consistency, we just find it hard to find. We fail to find. I have to tell people English is technically my second language. This is hard for me. They fail to find consistency on the road. I feel like sometimes they, especially with the Heights era, they haven't been winning on the road, and then they find a way to win or at least do well on the road, and now we're back here.
So the Fire, for the first time since 2010, won back-to-back road games last summer. They will need to do that and do that more than once if they're going to make anything of this season. Now, having said that, the team has been playing better. It's not just like it's been sheer luck, right? Like there were personnel changes with Jared and Shaqiri being out of the lineup. Brian Gutierrez being, I guess, given like the keys to the car to orchestrate the attack. Mm-hmm. I know like keys and orchestrate are mixed metaphors. The baton, I don't know.
That's funny.
To orchestrate
I like
the attack.
That.
Yeah, but. And like the switch to playing 3 center backs and having one guy, normally Carlos Theron, like man mark the most talented player on the pitch. And he's been very good at that. And especially with Bernadeschi out, like the most talented player on the pitch for Toronto is going to be Lorenzo Insigne. And so the idea that like he will just have to deal with a bunch of Carlos Theron in his face for 90 minutes, I think does give me some amount of hope for the match being a positive result for the Fire.
Hope is dangerous, but I mean, I do understand.
It's the hope that kills you. You're 100% right.
It's the hope that kills you. And like you mentioned, this is exactly sort of how we finished the last episode, talking about the win against the Galaxy, that this new sort of system that we find ourselves into, thanks to, like you mentioned, the early departure of Shaqiri to Switzerland, Guti being sort of more in that middle, even with this 3-5-2 or however you see it, depending on what the wingbacks do, it looks different and it looks promising because the Fire did say they wanted to play possession based and that just hasn't been working out. So changing into a more grab and go sort of thing does work. I mean, when you think about it, the last win before LA, the winning goal was also sort of a grab and go where Shaqiri lobbed the ball all the way ahead to Gutierrez, who was just running, and he went into the back of the net. So I guess it works. I guess another moment where Shaqiri just sort of left his mark and left.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, we'll see what happens. I think that this is going to be a good test for the Fire because
Amen.
The other thing is like John Hurban's team, like it really like he like had a very charmed 2022 World Cup qualifying cycle with the Canadian men's national team. And I think towards the end, you sort of saw that carriage turning into a pumpkin before your eyes. And no, like legitimately, like, so he had a custom sword made for the Canadian men's national team. And he did this like whole like Excalibur thing with the sword before matches. And like players were into it and the team was winning. And then the team stopped winning and he was doing it. And players were like, but like, what the heck, dude? Like we need like tactical advice and plans and like actual stuff. And like, you're messing around with this sword. And so I think it's one of those things where like it works until it doesn't. And I think the question is, he's never coached professionally at the club level before. The question is like, how does this work at the club level? Like that was the question going into the season. So far it has, but when you look at the results, they had a good streak, and like they've had some negative streaks, and like, is there another moment where it's like the carriage turns into a pumpkin, or the wheels fall off, or like whatever metaphor you want to use? And when it does, are we back to the same Toronto we saw in 2023, where it's like you get Bernadeschi vaping on the team plane and whatever else, and you know what I mean? Like legitimately, like that's a thing that happened, according to multiple reports.
That was funny though. I remember hearing that for the first time. I was like, "What is going on over in Toronto?" Well, I mean,
Italians gonna Italian.
Oh yeah, no. Oh dear. Man, though I wish I could go. I've been literally talking for the past few days with friends about going back to Italy. It needs to happen.
Is Italy still banned on the podcast?
No, I'm pretty sure we said that it is unbanned. But unless I keep talking about it more and more, it will be rebanned. So I will stop myself. So hopefully the Fire find a way to take this sort of newfound formation and situation they have essentially put themselves into that Frank Lopez has sort of created with the absence of Shaqiri and other factors to create a result over in BMO Field, which hasn't happened in a while. Looking back at past results in Toronto, they've been either draws or Toronto wins, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like obviously if you're a Fire fan, like being a Fire fan at this stage is being a bet on change for the better, right? Yep. Like that's what it has to be. So
the last time the Fire won in Toronto was 2012. Yeah. Also, I feel like at the end of this month, the Fire have the ability to do the funniest thing and finish the Cascadia triple.
Elaborate.
I'm not going to tell you about geography too much.
2022,
but
22, they beat Vancouver. Last year, they beat Portland. And this year, they're facing Seattle.
Yes, but we'll get to that match later. I was like, because I don't want to like break this to you, but like Toronto is not in Cascadia. Yeah. I realize that most Americans think that all Canadas are the same. Yeah. But
oh no, I looked at the match and like, oh wait, we have that.
That's true. And I think we haven't played in Seattle since 2020 when that weird season sort of happened. But we're not talking about Seattle. We're talking about Toronto. And very similar situation to the Galaxy game where we haven't won against the Galaxy since 2010. I'm pretty sure that was the year when we last beat them prior to this game. So let's do it again, essentially.
And the last time the Fire beat the Galaxy at home was 2006, and they won a trophy that year. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
No, that's exactly what Tim is saying. If we win at Toronto, we're winning something, some form of silverware.
No, I'm saying it's already preordained, apparently, because the win against the Galaxy.
Sure. All right. So, predizione. Do we have any predictions in Toronto?
No.
I was going to say 1-1. Yeah, I think that we're both on the same draw train.
I want to say... Oh my days, because I want to keep this train rolling, like I've been saying for the past few episodes of with the new formation and sort of this whole situation, like they keep finding a step, and hopefully turning into more of a stride. I don't know how, of course, that's going to work with the break that the team has had in the past week. 1-1 does seem appropriate, though I want to be the optimist this episode and say 2-1 Fire, and that they're gonna do it again. Though it's probably gonna be in a very similar situation to the Galaxy, where it was fairly close, but we ended up finding that little push over the edge, essentially. I mean, amen, I say. Just hopefully we get some sort of push over the line again. And, and a lot of people, like I said in previous episodes, have already written off the Fire for this season in terms of like getting into the playoffs or having some semblance of a team. But, why not? Just keep going step by step.
Yeah.
All right. Good episode. I did have my little stutter where I forgot how to speak the English language, but we're here. We made it. Yay! So, ladies and germs and they thems of the fire, thank you for listening to this episode. Bit of a shorter one, of course, because we didn't have a review, but we did have a lot to talk about nonetheless. Any last words of wisdom before we leave our hungry listeners?
I haven't had a word of wisdom in my life, so I'm not going to start now.
All right. DJ?
I just rolled a critical failure on wisdom. So
I love that for you. All right. And if you're not hungry, then, good on you as well. But I honestly have been craving Taco Bell for some reason. I don't know why. I've just been thinking about getting it. I think I'll get it after this podcast is done. So, as always, I've been Alan, the Pole with the Goal. DJ and Tim have also been lovely co-hosts. If you haven't already, what are you doing? You are incredibly late. Follow us, MIR97, as well as MIR97 Pods on Twitter, as well as, of course, the Men in Red 97 socials on other platforms, as well as Facebook, if you still use that, Instagram, and, of course, the websites, meninred97.com, where you can find all the articles. Come on, you Men in Red.
On you Men in Red.
let's go find.
Okay.